Stop scrolling. Seriously, if you own a gun, or if you keep a firearm in your vehicle, or if you're even thinking about doing either of those things, you need to hear this right now. Most people don't realize what's happening until they're sitting in the back of a police car with handcuffs on, facing a felony charge they never saw coming. And I'm not being dramatic. This is real, this is happening, and it is affecting everyday, law-abiding gun owners all across this country. So stay with me for a minute, because what I'm about to share with you could literally save your freedom. The Supreme Court of the United States, all 9 justices, not 5, not 6, all 9, just handed down a unanimous ruling that is changing the way gun laws work in this country. And when I say unanimous, I want you to really sit with that. This wasn't a close call. This wasn't a 5-4 conservative versus liberal split like you see on a lot of big decisions. Every single justice agreed. Liberal, conservative didn't matter. 9-0. And that tells you something. That tells you this ruling carries enormous legal weight, and it is going to be used by courts, prosecutors, and law enforcement all over the country for years to come. Now, before I tell you exactly what the ruling says and what it means for you personally, let me give you a little background, because this doesn't make full sense unless you understand where we've been with gun laws over the last few years. Stay with me, because this context is going to make everything click. Back in 2022, the Supreme Court issued another landmark ruling, a case called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen. And that ruling was a big deal. It basically said that gun laws in this country have to be grounded in historical tradition. In other words, if the government wants to restrict your right to keep and bear arms, they have to point to something in American history, laws from the founding era, from the 1700s or 1800s, that shows that kind of restriction was accepted back then. If they can't do that, the restriction might not be constitutional. A lot of gun rights advocates celebrated that ruling, and for good reason. It was a major expansion of Second Amendment protections. But here's what a lot of people don't realize. That ruling opened up a flood of legal challenges. Defendants all over the country started using the Bruen decision to challenge their gun-related convictions. And some of those challenges made it all the way back up to the Supreme Court, which brings us to right now, which brings us to this new ruling. And this one did not go the way a lot of gun owners were hoping. Let me tell you about the case at the center of this ruling, because I think it's going to feel very familiar to a lot of you. The case involves a man, an ordinary person, not some hardened criminal, who was found with a gun in his car. Now, the details vary slightly depending on which aspect of the ruling we're talking about, but the core situation is something millions of Americans encounter every single day: a person, a vehicle, a firearm. And the question the court had to answer was, does the government have the constitutional authority to restrict or regulate how, when, and under what circumstances you can have a gun in your car? And the answer, unanimous, 9-0, was yes. Under certain circumstances, absolutely yes. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute. I have a concealed carry permit. I have the right to bear arms. The Second Amendment protects me. And you're not wrong. Those things are all true. But here's what this ruling makes crystal clear, and this is the part I really need you to hear. Your constitutional right to keep and bear arms does not mean you have an unlimited right to have a gun anywhere, anyhow, at any time, with zero restrictions whatsoever. The Supreme Court has never said that, and this ruling reaffirms it, loudly, clearly, unanimously. Let me break this down in plain English, because this is where a lot of people get confused. The Second Amendment gives you the right to keep and bear arms. That's real. That's protected. But courts, including the Supreme Court, have consistently said that right can be regulated in certain ways, as long as those regulations fit within the historical tradition of gun laws in America. So the question was never really, can you have a gun in your car? The question is, under what circumstances can the government say you can't? And this ruling answers that question in a way that should make every gun owner in this country pay very close attention. Here's what the court focused on. They looked at a specific federal law, one that restricts certain people from possessing firearms. And they said that law is constitutional. It doesn't violate the Second Amendment, and the reason they said that is really important. They went back through history, through the founding era, through the 1800s, and they found evidence that even back then, communities had the authority to disarm people who were considered dangerous or who posed a threat to public safety. The tradition existed, and because it existed historically, the modern law is valid. Now, here's why this matters for you specifically if you're carrying a gun in your car. The logic the court used in this ruling doesn't just apply to the specific federal law in this case. It sets a framework, a way of thinking, that lower courts all over the country are going to use to evaluate gun laws going forward. And that framework is broader than most people realize. Let's talk about what this means in practical, real-world terms. Because I don't just want to give you a law school lecture, I want you to walk away from this video actually knowing what to do differently. First, know your status. This is the most important thing. The ruling reinforces that certain people with felony convictions, people with certain domestic violence records, people subject to certain restraining orders, are restricted from possessing firearms. Full stop. No exceptions. And here's the thing. A lot of people don't know they fall into one of these categories. Maybe you had a conviction years ago that you've moved past. Maybe you thought that old restraining order expired. Maybe you didn't realize a misdemeanor domestic violence charge counts. I'm telling you right now. Find out. Before you put a gun in your car, before you carry anywhere, find out exactly what your legal status is. Because under this ruling, the government's authority to enforce those restrictions has just been strengthened significantly. Second, understand your state's laws, because they vary wildly, and this is where a lot of people get into serious trouble. Some states are what we call shall-issue states. If you meet the requirements, they have to give you a concealed carry permit. Other states are much more restrictive. And when it comes to guns and cars specifically, the rules can be completely different from one state to the next, and sometimes even from one county or city to the next. In some states, you can have a loaded firearm in your glove compartment with no permit at all. In other states, that same gun in that same glove compartment is a felony. I'm not exaggerating. This is the reality of gun law in America, and this Supreme Court ruling is being layered on top of all of that complexity. Let's take a step back and talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, and that's what happens during a traffic stop. Because for millions of gun owners, that is the scenario that matters most. You're driving home. You've got your legally owned firearm in the center console or under the seat or in the glove box. A police officer pulls you over for a broken taillight. What do? Here's what a lot of people don't realize. How you handle that moment can be the difference between going home that night and spending the next 5 years fighting a criminal case. After this Supreme Court ruling, police and prosecutors have even more legal backing to pursue charges if they believe your possession was unlawful in any way. So let's talk about best practices. And I want to be really clear that these are not just suggestions. These could protect your life and your freedom. If you are legally carrying and you get pulled over, the safest thing you can do is be transparent with the officer right away. Keep your hands visible. Don't reach for anything. Calmly let the officer know that you have a firearm in the vehicle and where it is. In many states, you're actually legally required to disclose this. Even if you're not required to, doing so voluntarily tends to de-escalate the situation immediately. Officers know how to handle a disclosed firearm. They don't always know how to handle one they find unexpectedly. And that difference can change everything about how that stop goes. Know exactly where your gun is, and don't have it in a place where you'd have to reach past it to get your registration or your insurance card. I know that sounds like common sense, but you would not believe how many situations go sideways because someone reaches across a firearm for a document and the officer sees that movement. Keep your important documents separate from your firearm. Always. Now let's talk about the emotional side of this because I think it gets overlooked. A lot of gun owners in this country are carrying because they are genuinely afraid. They live in neighborhoods where crime is real. They drive late at night for work. They are protecting their family, their livelihood, their sense of safety. That is a completely legitimate reason to carry. And this video is not here to tell you that you're wrong for wanting to protect yourself. But I want you to understand that the law is changing around you, and staying informed is part of being a responsible gun owner. It's not enough to just have the right. You have to understand the boundaries of that right, and those boundaries just shifted. Here's something else that's critically important as we move through 2026. This ruling is going to trigger a wave of new legislation at the state level. Lawmakers in states that have been wanting to tighten gun restrictions now have fresh judicial support to do so. They're going to be looking at this 9-0 ruling and they're going to introduce new laws. Laws about storage in vehicles, laws about transportation, laws about who qualifies for permits. And a lot of those laws are going to pass, which means the legal landscape for gun owners in a car could look very different 12 months from now than it does today. This is why organizations that track gun legislation, and I'm not talking about advocacy groups, I'm talking about nonpartisan legal tracking organizations, are saying that 2026 is one of the most important years for gun owners to be paying attention. The post-Bruin legal environment is still being shaped. Cases are still working through the courts. And this new unanimous ruling is a major piece of the puzzle that is going to influence dozens of other decisions in the months ahead. Let me also address something I've been seeing a lot of in comment sections and forums, and that is the idea that this ruling takes away Second Amendment rights. I want to be really careful here because that framing is not accurate, and believing it could actually get you into legal trouble. The ruling does not say you can't own a gun. It does not say you can't carry a gun. What it says is that the government has historically grounded authority to restrict possession in specific, defined circumstances. Your rights are still there. But they have always had boundaries, and this ruling clarifies where some of those boundaries are. If you walk away from this thinking, the Supreme Court took my guns, you might stop paying attention to the actual legal details that affect you. And that's when people get caught off guard. Now, I also want to give you a warning about something completely different, but very related. Whenever there's a major Supreme Court ruling about guns, scammers come out of the woodwork. It happens every single time. You're going to start seeing ads, emails, text messages, and websites telling you that you need to re-register your firearm, or pay a fee to update your permit, or take some new online course to keep your carry rights valid. Let me be very direct with you. Those are scams. There is no federal re-registration process triggered by this ruling. Your existing permits do not become invalid overnight because of a Supreme Court decision. If you get a message like that, delete it. If someone calls you claiming to be from a government agency and asks for your gun registration information or payment, hang up. Report it. These scammers prey on people who are anxious and confused after big legal news, and right now, a lot of gun owners are exactly that. What you should do, and this is real, practical advice, is connect with a licensed attorney in your state who specializes in firearms law. I know that sounds expensive, but many of them offer free consultations, and even a 30-minute phone call can give you a clear picture of what this ruling means for someone in your specific situation, in your specific state, with your specific history. That 30-minute call could be the most valuable thing you do this year. Additionally, your state's Attorney General office often publishes public guidance after major Supreme Court decisions, explaining what they mean for residents of your state. Look that up. Read it. Bookmark it. And here's something really important for those of you who carry for work. Security professionals, delivery drivers, long-haul truckers, real estate agents who go into unfamiliar properties, healthcare workers who travel between locations. Your exposure to this ruling is heightened because you're in your vehicle more, you cross more jurisdictions, and the circumstances of your carry are more complex. If that describes you, please do not wait to get legal clarity. The stakes are higher for you, and the rules that apply to you may be more complicated than they are for someone who just drives to and from work in one county. Let's talk about what to actually check right now, today, before you get back in your car. First, pull up your concealed carry permit if you have one, and verify that it is current and not expired. This sounds obvious, but renewals slip through the cracks more often than you'd think. Second, look up the specific laws in your state about transporting a firearm in a vehicle, not just whether you can, but how it must be stored, whether it must be unloaded, whether the ammunition must be stored separately, and whether your permit is recognized in neighboring states if you cross state lines. Third, if you have any criminal history at all, anything, even something old and minor, talk to a lawyer before you carry. Because the categories of people restricted from possession are broader than most people assume, and this ruling just gave prosecutors more confidence to pursue those charges. The bottom line here is this: the Supreme Court spoke, and they spoke with one voice. All 9 justices agreed that the government has real constitutional authority to regulate gun possession in specific circumstances, including in vehicles. That doesn't make you powerless. That doesn't mean your Second Amendment rights are gone. But it does mean that ignorance of the law is no longer something you can afford. It never really was, but it especially isn't now. Your responsibility as a gun owner didn't just stay the same after this ruling, it increased. Because now the legal environment around you is tighter. The enforcement is more legally bulletproof, and the consequences of a misstep are as serious as ever. Knowing your rights is important. Knowing the limits of your rights is equally important. And knowing the specific laws in your state, your county, your situation, that might be the most important thing of all. Don't carry in ignorance. Don't assume what was okay last year is still okay today. Don't wait until you're sitting in a courtroom to find out what this ruling actually means for you. Stay informed. Talk to a professional. Verify your permits, know the rules for your state, and share this video with every gun owner you know, because there are a lot of people out there who have no idea this ruling came down, and they deserve to know before it affects their life. You have rights. Protect them by understanding them. Stay safe, stay legal, and stay informed.